All right, guys, we're back. Now let's jump into the next part of this one. Add your B-roll and cutaway images to video track 2, then download the project sample ad to compare your choices, add it to a new sequence. I'll show you how to do that, then edit them to track 2 and hire using source record editing. So I'm going to pop back over here. We've got our track.
Take the right notes or
that we've just finished doing a little bit of an audio mix too. We've got a bunch of markers. Of course, you should have gone through and done markers for your whole thing. But I'm going to go ahead and jump back here to the beginning and zoom in. And then come over here, use the tilde key to make my edit window here a little bit bigger. Let's jump into stock footage, and shift backslash is going to give us all of these stock footage clips. Now here's a sample project, and if I double click on it, it loads it up into the source viewer.
become nurse.
And you can actually see the sample ad.
Look, if you're a struggling nursing student, you should be studying less and living more. The problem is you don't understand nursing school.
Now, so this is starting to get us to a point where you've got this reference where you can see how I did it, and so you can use the same images. I've also created some other images and stuff here for you. Of course, in your own videos, you're going to be making more of your own stuff, but here's a really cool trick that you can use to quickly be able to edit this together. If you've got a reference mix or project like this, a reference video, you can come in, I'm going to find that sample ad, I'm going to right click on it, and you could choose new sequence from clip. And that's going to make a new sequence. I'm going to need to shift backslash to find it because it's going to have the sequence icon that you can see right here. And in fact, let's go up a level or two. I'm going to move both my sequences out here to the main place. I'm going to move any of these other pieces elsewhere. So now I've got my sequences right here, including this sample one. If I double click it, now you see that we've got two different ones that open up here. So I've got the one that I've been editing, and I've got this sample one. Now, the beauty of Premiere, one of the cool features, is you can actually click on any of these and drag it. And now I could actually, if I put it here in the center, well, it's already there. That just dragging it to the center just combines it with everything that's already there. But if you drag it down to the bottom bar, for example, then it's going to place it beneath or at the bottom of this square. So if I drag it down to the bottom and let go, now all of a sudden I've got two different timelines, which is pretty amazing. I'm going to jump back up here, use my backslash key and shift minus to shrink everything down. Well, the nice thing is you could now go through and see, well, how did this person do it? So when you're producing your own, you could actually load in a sample video and go through and compare the timing, compare the color, compare the visuals, by loading it into its own timeline. Pretty cool.
Look, if you're a struggling nursing student, you should be studying less and living more.
So I can see some places that we're going to add things like titles and text. In my case, where's the first place that they add?
The problem is you don't understand.
You don't understand nursing school. So I've got a little bit of B-roll right there that I can go ahead and start to put in. So I'm going to take this, let's just make this just a little bit bigger. Zoom in a little bit, so let's find that part.
If you're a struggling nursing student, you should be studying less and living more. The problem is you don't understand.
So if right here we've got this, you don't understand nursing school, I'm going to go ahead and close this out and just start to build this. But if you've got a bigger screen, you're certainly welcome to make this and just go through and use the clips that I used.
The problem is you don't understand nursing school.
So what I want to do is I want to make sure that, number one, my source patch is right here, so that when I find the clip that I want and I put it up here and I drop it in, it's going to go to this track. But here's how we do it. I'm going to set my in and my out points so that the footage knows what its maximum place to go is. So let's find.
You should be studying less and living more. The problem is you don't understand nursing school.
So it says you don't understand nursing school. If you hit the X key on your keyboard, it actually will set the in and out points around whatever clip your playhead is over. So if I was over this one, the X key marks that one. If I set it here, it marks that one. So it literally sets my in and my out points all the way around that line that I already had cut up. So let's use that as our starting point. That's where I want.
The problem is you don't
understand nursing school, right? Now, I may not want it all that whole distance or that whole time, but it's an easy thing to just hit the X key and it marks our in and our out. I'm going to come over to my stock footage. I can open that up here and let's see if we can find one. Toggle that open with tilde, shift backslash. You don't understand nursing school. This looks like a girl that doesn't understand nursing school. This one, she's not quite as frustrated, but this one looks frustrated. So the thing you want to do, I'm going to load this up, double click and load it up in here, is now determine which part of this video do I want? Which part should go in here? So if I simply hit play, I can see she's not really doing anything, not really doing anything. Boom, action. So we want to always cut on the action if we can. If we can cut on the action, that's going to be more interesting than cutting just to a girl that's sitting kind of not doing anything. So what I want to do is I'm going to just play through this until action is about to happen. I'm going to set my in point here. So now I've got an in point. So that's where it's going to start. So she can look nice and frustrated. But I don't know how much of this, how much of the output I need to fill this gap. I might need the whole thing, or I might only need like the first few seconds. So unless I'm constantly wanting to compare, here's what we can do. By making sure my source is patched to the second track, then what this will do is when I do an overwrite, I don't want to do an insert. If I did an insert, what would happen? It splits it and pushes everything to the side. So that's not what I want. I want an overwrite, which is going to start wherever by matching my endpoint to my endpoint, and period. There you go. So I hit that period key, and what it did is it matched that endpoint right here. It moved that down to this endpoint right here, and then it took as much of this as it needed until it hit this out point, and then it stopped. So the period key does an overwrite, and it popped it right in there. If I had accidentally had my source patch down here, it would have overwritten my main video, which is not what I want. So I want to make sure that source patch is here and drop it in. Let's see how that looks now.
Living more. The problem is you don't understand nursing school.
It's not bad, but also I want to see her say the problem is, then the cut happens. So I can simply hover over this and click and drag it right until maybe she says,
the problem is you don't understand nursing school, or
there we go. So you don't understand nursing
you don't understand nursing school, or you don't know how to read hundreds of pages.
Okay, so right there, we've got another one, hundreds of pages. I'm going to select this, or I've just got my playhead over it. X marks my in and my out points. I'm going to find my book full of hundreds of pages. Double click, there it is. Now this, I want to wait until they actually start moving. I don't want it to cut to it and then there's a long empty space where the pages are not actually doing anything. So as soon as the pages start going, I'm going to hit my endpoint. Same thing. That will match my endpoint to this endpoint, and it'll take as much of it as it needs to fill until it hits the out point. So the period key, boom, beautiful.
You don't understand.
Now I can tell this one needs resized a little bit. We'll get to that in just a second.
And nursing school, or you don't know how to read hundreds of pages. Take the
Nice. Okay, the next one is take the right notes. X. And there are certainly some note options in here, but I believe this one, let's see, here's somebody taking notes. I'm going to double click on that. And let's again rewind. At this point, they really, I could start really with just the beginning right here because they're taking notes the whole time. Though I do like the idea of, there we go. I like the idea if it's short enough to catch that movement. So I'm going to try setting the end point right there, so that when it cuts into it, then there's movement. Action is always better. So now, I don't know if this is going to be long enough, but let's try it. Hit the period key, and it was. Now, I want you to see something. What if I tried to move that in, but I had way too much time to fill, to where this was not going to be able to fill it? Well, when I hit that period key, it says, what do you want me to do? The source, aka this endpoint to outpoint in the source window, is shorter than the destination. So what does that mean? Well, that means that this, if I just drop it directly in here, it would not fit. So there's a few options it gives me. It says ignore source endpoint. And if I ignore that, then it's going to throw away this source endpoint and probably just grab from the beginning and put the whole thing down in there. Let's see what happens. If I hit ignore source endpoint, then it just takes as much of it as it needs to put it in. So let's undo. Let's try it again. Period. I could ignore this sequence out point, in which case it's going to keep this endpoint, keep this endpoint, but ignore this sequence out point. Let's try that. And so it ignored that out point. And we could try one more. In this case, ignore sequence endpoint. So ignore this endpoint. And so you can see it just put the whole thing in there, but it actually left this little tiny gap right here. So all that to say, I'm going to come back over here. The X key will highlight the piece that I want. And if I simply hit the plus key now. Now, the one other thing that you could do is, I'm going to set this again just to show you. If you hit that period key, you can actually say, change the clip speed. And what it'll do is it's going to stretch this piece of video to try to fill that whole thing. Now, if it has to slow it down too much, it's going to be pretty obvious. So let's try this. Hit OK. And so you can see that it's had to slow it down to 93.91% to make it fit that whole thing.
Take the right notes or study for exams.
And it's actually not that bad, but it did use that whole clip.
So you get confident.
So I'm going to undo that. I just wanted you to see all the possible options there. But in this case, I've got it marked, period key, and it's filled.
Take the right notes or study for exams so you get confident A's.
Okay, or study for exams. I'm going to set my endpoint or my X to match that. I'm going to come all the way back over here, use the up arrow and set the I key. That sets a new endpoint.
Or study for exams.
Or study for exams to get confident A's every time. So let's see what else we have here. I think we're going to want confident
A's. So you get confident A's every time.
So let's go add confident A's every time here. And I'm going to add this confident A's every time. I'm going to put them up there. They're talking, and all of a sudden he goes up with the high five. Let's see if we can get that. I'll set my endpoint and the period key drops it over. Let's see how it sounds.
Get confident A's every time.
Now in this case, they aren't doing everything yet. So he's just kind of sitting here with his hand in the air. So what we can do if we go, well, I like that, but I actually wanted it to be over at this point where they're all, like looking excited. Well, then we can actually use a different tool, the slip tool, which is accessed with the Y key, and the slide tool. So let's use the slip tool. And with that, if I click and I drag, then it actually lets me keep the time or the amount of time. But if I click and I drag, you can see what is going to be the first frame here and the last frame here. So I'm going to drag it until all their hands start going up there in the first frame. There we go. So right as that starts to get exciting, and what I've done is kept where the clip is at, but I've moved where it starts. So let's see what that looks like now.
Get confident A's every time. I know how you feel.
All right, so that now we have people actually hands in the air. It looks pretty good. Although I do like, okay, so here's actually a perfect example. I want this one to end on that high five. So I'm going to set my out point. I'm going to clear this in point, or just move that back to the beginning, because I want it to end right there. So watch this. Delete that.
A's every time.
Confident A's every time. I'm going to set that as the out point, drag this one back. And now, because I don't have an in point, I can actually match this down. And I want to ignore the source in point. I don't care about this in point. What I want is the out point to match the out point. So ignore the source in point. Keep the sequence in and out point. And what it'll do is it's going to match this out point down to it. So as soon as I hit OK, boom. And so that's going to end with that high five. Let's see.
You get confident A's every time.
They're looking confident, they're looking happy, and he's high-fiving himself. Sweet. All right, this last piece then.
For exams, notes, or study for exams so you get
study for exams so you get confident A's every time. So let's go and grab this. I'm going to hit the X key to mark that. Up arrow a couple times so it's back here. Hit the I key. And let's try to put this lady in. Same thing. I like that face. I like that hair moving back. Let's set that as the out point. And now I'll drop it in with the period, and it'll move the out point to the out point, and it'll take as much of this as it needs until it gets back to this end point. Boom. All right, so now that is how we've been adding
you
our
don't understand
B-roll.
nursing school, or you don't know how to read hundreds of pages. Take the right notes or study for exams so you get confident A's every time. I know how you feel.
Cool. All right, now again, this may or may not be exactly the scenario or exactly the same things, but I just wanted to show you how to do this so that you can go through and start to do the adding your B-roll and cutaway images. You don't have to do them exactly the way I did. In fact, you could do some of your own or shoot some of your own if you wanted. But in this case, it's going to help us see how we can use that in-out source record editing to be able to edit those in. Now, the last few things, we're going to get to transitions and scaling momentarily, but I do want to pop in here and fix some of this. So for example, I can see that this video clip was actually a little bit more widescreen and didn't perfectly fit. No problem. I'm just going to double click it. That's going to load it up here, and I can view the effect controls so that I can see this right here. So the effect controls, which is also accessible with Shift 5, I can now see the effect controls for that clip. So I've got it right here, it's selected. And once I select the position button or the scale button, either one, then that actually gets these nice little handles that I can click and just drag to make that filled up just a little bit more.
You don't understand nursing school, or you don't know how to read.
All right, and so for now, that's going to be the process. So go through and add the rest of your B-roll and cutaways, edit using source record, practice using that input, output, IO editing, and then we'll come back and take a look at the next section in just a minute. Thanks so much.